to our pod. And by that, I mean on Wednesdays we read. I'm Hannah.
I'm Laura.
And we are two best friends who do a deep dive into a new book series, one book at a time. And sometimes we go back to the series.
And we come back.
And we come back, especially when the author is still putting out books in the series. We should be getting 3 more. We have her promise on
that. We're under oath saying she will give us more Murderbot.
As you know, everything is that's said on a podcast is true. So she has to deliver 3 more books.
Martha was caught.
And we cover the Murderbot Diaries, System Collapse, which was just released a couple weeks ago. Yeah. So guys, it's fresh and fun for all of us to do like a deep dive into the themes and characters of this book.
And also, like, if you're at this point, either you don't care about spoilers or you've already read System Collapse. And hopefully it's one of those two, because last week we covered the entire book and it was extremely spoiler filled. Mm-hmm. So today
what are you doing here?
Still doing spoilers. Goodbye if you don't want them.
But Laura, before we get into it, what are you reading, watching, and or enjoying?
So Hannah, I'm again going to preface this because we are recording earlier than November when this comes out. So I'm going to preface this again with, hopefully by the time that this episode comes out, that the SAG-AFTRA actors will have received a fair contract, and that we are
Laura and I are being incredibly optimistic, guys.
We are clear to talk about things. Hopefully. We're really sorry if that has not been the case. We were hoping.
And a little bit of behind the scenes as well. Like, the reason we're saying this with all the preface in the world is because A, we're being optimistic and we're letting ourselves talk about this for the first time in months. And B, these episodes drop when Laura's on vacation. So like Laura is our editor.
So early.
Laura is our editor. So like I've been the one who, like, Laura obviously agrees, but I've been the one who's like, nope, I do not want to violate SAG-AFTRA, even though it's like a little unclear if we could talk about it or not. And Laura's like, yeah, these episodes have to be done and edited by my vacation because I do not want to have to go back to the editing board. Yeah. And so it's like, okay, yep, you're right. Let's just talk about it and hope for the best.
So that's why I'm coming in with all these concessions. Like, hopefully they've reached
Laura, I hope
we care about them.
Vacation.
If you're listening, I'm having a great time on vacation. And hopefully they're no longer on strike.
Yes.
But talking about some things that I watched the Dungeons and Dragons movie.
Isn't that fun?
It's a lot of fun.
I like it a lot.
I honestly didn't know what to expect. D&D is just like such a blind spot for me. And I never know what people are talking about when they mention D&D, and even some of like the characters and people that they can play, I have to Google them to be like, what the heck is that?
Right.
Because this is maybe gonna throw fantasy people already know that I'm not the biggest fantasy reader, but I had to Google last year, what is a druid? No idea what a druid was.
Fair enough.
But now I know. And that movie was a ton of fun, and I wish that Regé-Jean Page was in it more because I'm a big fan. But
you're obsessed with him.
I love to watch him on television. So I wish he was in it more. But I thought that they actually did his role really well, because he's the guy that is like handsome and perfect that Chris Pine hates. So I found that very funny. But I believe that's what a paladin is, because I also Googled like, what's the difference between a paladin and a wizard?
Yeah.
So, because I don't know D&D things. And yeah, so a paladin, I guess, is like a divine power. So it would make sense that he does everything perfect. Yes. But yeah, it was a fun movie. I really liked it. And I don't know. I think that maybe I can understand some of like the people that are like, this is weird, but I just thought it was kind of a romp, honestly.
Well, the thing is, it's supposed to be a romp because, like, I am obviously engaged to someone who is a dungeon master and has been since high school, so he knows all of the D&D things. And he and I went to the movie together, and he was just like, he said that there were just so many moments that are very funny and very like in the know of like D&D, but they mix it where like you and I could enjoy it, who kind of have no idea what's going on. Like the beginning where they're doing the whole tale and then they're waiting for like a random character named Jonathan. And
so like Jonathan, is he on his way? Or?
Yeah, he's on his way. And like he was like, that's like, it's really funny because you're making this like he's a really important guy. We have to wait for him to come. Da, da, da. They're like, oh, what's his name? And he's like, that's just such a D&D guy thing to be like, his name's Jonathan. And it's just like, what, that Jonathan? Like, are you serious? And it's like, yeah, that's his name. And it's just like a D&D master like randomly going off the cuff of like, yeah, this totally what happened. And then like a random dragon being like, spoilers for Honor Among Thieves D&D, but like there's a random dragon there, like there's a huge plot point where the dragon is incredibly heavy, and it's just like, oh yeah, that's just a random roll where they're like pops up, and he's like, that's such a random thing that just happens. And so knowing all those behind the scenes like made it more enjoyable knowing afterwards, even though I had no knowledge going in. But
yeah, I think that was kind of a similar thing for me where I didn't have any of this background info, but it was kind of a thing where the characters acted surprised at certain things that happened within the movie, so then it made it more fun. Like when the dragon appeared and they're like, did he eat his last home? And he's struggling to get through where they're at. It looks like just this big cat flopping around. It was so cute.
It's so fun. And then like they're doing something and it's actually working, and then all of a sudden it's not working. It's like, oh yeah, roll for like whatever.
They're just rolling with it. That was a lot of fun. And I think too at the beginning it's funny to see the whole, but you were approved to be released with the whole Jonathan thing.
He said that that's also a very D&D thing. Like you would go through this big huge thing, and it's like, oh yeah, if you had just waited around, they would have told you exactly what you wanted to know.
That's hilarious.
So that's very D&D focused, but or at least from his perspective. Guys, don't come at me if I'm wrong, because I don't care. This is one man's perspective who I'm getting married to, so I don't know that much. But
an important perspective then.
An important perspective, but I also know that I think the Regé-Jean Page, like when he was walking and he just like didn't stop walking, that was like kind of a line in the script, but he took it very literal, so it wasn't supposed to be like that. So Chris Pine going like,
he's going up to a boulder,
he's just going it. Oh, he's just gonna walk right over it. Okay, walk that was
okay.
A little bit ad-libbed, because like Regé-Jean Page was just like, yeah, I'm gonna take that note seriously, and Chris Pine is like, yeah, I'm just gonna roll with it. Like, so
I feel like Regé-Jean Page is probably someone who has a pretty good sense of humor.
Yeah,
surrounding like all of his recent fame and everything too, because he was on Saturday Night Live and poked fun at himself and everything about it. But I think that he, just from the vibes that I got from watching him in this movie, that he and Chris Pine probably had a pretty good rapport, and it looked like they kind of had fun with their whole back and forth of Chris Pine being like, this guy sucks, don't trust him, and they're like, well, he's really helping us out, are you sure you don't want to trust him? He's doing things to help us. That doesn't make sense.
Also love Chris Pine so much. He's just like amazing.
Me too.
He is technically a nepo baby, but I do know
his dad was in Chips.
Yeah, but I do know that like one of my favorite Chris Pine stories is actually from Gilmore Girls. They had like the casting directors went on Gilmore Guys, which is a podcast I loved. And they were like, oh yeah, certain people will come on to like do test shoots with us. And like there were certain people who I met who I was like, oh, we're not going to be able to put you on the show, but like you're going to make it big one day, just because like talking to you is intense.
Sure.
And they were like telling the story of like, oh yeah, it was someone who like had parents in the industry and we met them, and it was definitely Chris Pine. And I was just like in awe of him. And I was like, well, we can't put you on Gilmore Girls, but like I cannot wait to see you blow up.
That's amazing.
He's just the most charming and nice person you're ever gonna meet. And he was so talented in the moment. And she was like, I was just in awe of him, and he was so pretty. So I love that.
Yeah, I think he doesn't get enough credit amongst all the Chris's, and
he's obviously the best Chris.
Yeah, he's the best Chris, and I don't know why we're not acknowledging that. But
Because some people want to say it's Chris Evans, but it's not, guys. I'm so sorry that you're so wrong.
Is it just because he was the most recent sexiest man alive?
I think it's because people think Chris Evans is like hotter and like he is more conventionally attractive. And also, like, I feel like sometimes when people are talking about the best Chris's, you have to take into account what men think the hottest Chris is. So like men
Really?
will be like, oh yeah, Chris Evans, or well, it's like the whole
I find that interesting that they think Chris Evans is the hottest because Chris Hemsworth, in
well
my opinion, has a better body.
well,
But
that's the thing is they'll do Chris Evans or Chris Hemsworth because that's there's like a huge TikTok joke about how men actually like all men if they had to pick a man to kiss would pick Ryan Gosling. So it's like straight men. It's like all straight men. So like all straight men would be gay for Ryan Gosling because there's something specifically where they think like Ryan Gosling is the epitome of like hot masculinity.
because of the Notebook.
I don't know why, but like all men are like, oh, I would never kiss like there are random TikToks that go into like, oh yeah, all men would be gay for Ryan Gosling, and it's specifically Ryan Gosling, and like he's everyone's like main person, and so like that's where I think Chris Evans becomes like the utmost Chris because you have all these bro dudes who are like, well, he's the best Chris, and women are like, I'm sorry, it is
It's Chris
definitely
Pine,
Chris
but
Pine, and
okay.
you're wrong. It's like Chris Pine is better.
It also
Uh,
might be something though that you and I, Hannah, we really appreciate humor, and he seems like a smart and humorous person. So I think that plays into it a little bit too.
well, I also think that I don't know. There's something
But I
weird
did
about.
like I really liked that show Limitless on Disney
Oh
Plus
yeah,
with Chris Hemsworth, and he seemed very down to earth in that. So I think that they probably all have good things about them. We shouldn't be
yes.
deciding who is better just
Oh,
because they're famous Chris's. But I
I
I
think they're used to the conversation,
yeah,
Laura.
they're probably okay with it at
They
this
know that
point.
everyone has their opinion, and yeah,
But yeah, I really thought Chris Pine was a lot of fun in this movie, and he doesn't get enough good roles like this.
Well, he's also been he has been in a lot of different ones, though. It's just not ones I feel like you're
They're not
in.
as mainstream though, because he's been in several rom-coms that I've seen, and
But
I feel like they aren't like the ones that you see advertised a ton. You know what I mean?
well, I was more talking about like he has been in Wonder Woman. He was a mainstay in that. He
Oh,
was
that's true. I have a blind spot for superhero stuff.
yeah, and he was in Star Trek, which you also have a blind spot for. But
Yeah,
like
because I have not
he
watched any Trek stuff.
yeah, and I'm a huge Trek fan, so like I see him and I watch all the superhero movies, so I actually
Mm,
like see him because even in this role he kind of was like I don't want to do another like franchise movie. But
sure.
then he watched his nephew play D&D and he was interested in it, and so that's why he
Okay.
did it. So he actually does, and he was like in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse as one of the Peter Parkers.
Oh, okay.
So he's been in a
Which
lot. It's just I think it's not stuff you're as well versed with.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
still continuing my Marvel journey. Like I watched
Are you?
Thor Ragnarok recently.
Oh, did you like that one?
Yeah, I did like that one. That's a Taika Waititi though, so I feel like that's kind of my brand of humor
Yeah.
because like some of the things that happened in that I was cackling because they really played into some of the bizarreness of the superhero stuff and like how something can happen and one of the characters can just be like, "Oh, yeah, so I guess that won't be our foundation anymore. We're gonna have to find some other place because that one's done."
I feel like you almost need that with Thor because I feel like Thor isn't a very interesting comic book character otherwise. Like there's not much interesting about Thor.
No,
You kind of have to have an absurdist humor for him because the first movie of Thor
it's boring. It's very
is so
boring.
boring. The second one barely exists. Like no one
Mhm.
likes the second one. People skip the second one. Even though it has Laura's current favorite doctor because she's only seen season she's only seen
Season
the
one of Doctor
season
Who.
one of the reboot. But like people skip the second Thor. I didn't see it in my first run through of all the movies. So it takes like Thor Ragnarok
Honestly,
for
the
them to kind of
Thors
find
are
their
like the least memorable to me of all of
yeah.
the Marvel movies. Like I remember the Iron Mans because I hated them.
Yes.
And I think honestly for me, to hear criticism of Marvel where people are liking it less as they go along, I think is interesting because as someone who
Because
was
they're
not a
wrong.
person who was watching this like as they came out, who is watching this like once the stuff is already out, kind of just slowly, I like them the opposite way. I'm liking them more as we go along because now I think that I can't remember which it was one of the Captain Americas was like a turning point. It might have been Civil
Civil
War.
War. It's usually the turning point for people.
Yeah, I think that was a turning point for me where I was like, I'm starting to like these more. I don't know that I would be like, I'm a huge Marvel fan, but I definitely enjoy the movies a lot more and was more interested versus like rage watching and being like, Tony Stark, you suck so much. Oh,
Right. I agree with you. I think the ones that have come out since are a little bit better because they're more
yeah.
interesting.
Well, yeah,
And
there's better writing too. It's
yeah.
like it's just better. Yeah.
Well, and
I,
also the one thing is these are also a product of their time. Like
I get that, but still to have people put Iron Man 1 up on a pedestal into
that's people
the
who can't
year
let go of crap.
2023 is ridiculous. And to be like, well, I hate uh I I
No,
don't know,
you're
Black Panther. I hate Black Panther. And it's like that's a far superior movie. What are you talking about?
no, 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 you're totally right. Mine is more like in terms of the writing, I do like to look at things of like writers who were writing that at the time
Oh
that
yeah, they're
was like
definitely like people that
popular
were
lex.
writing The Office. So
So yeah, exactly. Well, and so that's kind of like I like to frame it that way to make sure because like in 20 years, someone might like look back at Black Panther and be like, "Oh, everything was so on the nose. There was actually no discourse to this," and it's like that could probably be true,
oh, absolutely.
because discourse
Absolutely.
changes and things that are important change, and that's like us, like you
Us
watching
talking
the
about this at this moment, I'm saying, oh yeah,
yeah, the
I
writing
prefer
is so
Black
much
Panther.
better.
It's so
Like
much better.
yeah,
People may listen to this years
right,
down the road and be like, what a terrible take. Like that
right.
was a
No,
super
I
terrible movie.
fully agree with you that they get better with time, but I always like I'm careful with writing because I'm like, oh well, but also writing is a product of its time. So like we're gonna like
Yeah.
the more current stuff as long as you're growing as a person. And the people who prefer the older stuff usually aren't growing as people.
Yeah. I don't know.
There's
I just find that take to be interesting, especially because I think you had told me before, like when you watched what was it, Ms. Marvel,
yeah.
that people were like, I'm just so sick of all the Marvel stuff that's coming out and everything. And I'm like, I feel like that's weird. It seems to me to be getting better as I'm watching more and more of this. So weird take.
Yeah, but Marvel stuff is definitely something that people need to grow with because like people
Yeah.
who hate the Marvel stuff, Miss Marvel stuff, like it's obviously because those are some of the more progressive ones and people don't like progression in society because then they
Yeah.
feel like they're losing out instead of
And
just
to me, it's almost like watching it. I'm like, this is more refreshing to see that
mm-hmm.
they're updating their takes and, like, oh, women aren't as useless in some of these things. And, oh, look, actually, there's people of color. Oh, wow, cool. That's refreshing. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not just like Tony Stark is mean and we like that and it's funny. Ha ha. And he also has a girlfriend who he has zero chemistry with, who is
Oh my
hot, so we
gosh.
forgive it. And it's like, that's no, it's
Well,
not
and
very
also
good.
I don't know,
And
it's
I,
kind of
I
like
get a little like mad too, because if you ever say that to anyone, they're like, well, Iron Man is the foundation, and everything was
the
built off of Iron Man.
first
We wouldn't have the rest of the universe if it wasn't
and
for Iron Man. It's like, well, he's
yeah.
still a D-bag.
And
I
also,
still can
you want to
say
know
he's a
why
D-bag.
that's interesting? It's only interesting because they made you like Iron Man. Because before those movies, Iron Man was one of the least popular superheroes. And it was actually intellectual property that got that movie put in place because he was the effing cheapest superhero to do. And so it was just money that made them pick Iron Man. And then you ate it up like sheep. So, like, that's why we're all here. That's why you think Iron Man is the best because literally he was the cheapest and he was the least liked. And you actually, just like Robert Downey Jr., you just
Yeah.
don't have the social awareness for it. Um, also the
I'm curious.
foundation is like X-Men and all the other show like superhero movies that came before it. Like this was like a new
I
thing
know
that
there
they,
was tons of X-Men movies before this.
because I loved the X-Men the most because I grew up on those cartoons, and there was a ton of Spider-Man movies and I grew up on those as well. So like my love of Marvel comes from like my childhood love of
Mhm.
actual other superhero things, and then this is just a continuation of that. It's not a foundation, and people need to calm down. So sorry, that's
Yeah,
my small
sorry,
rant.
I'm just saying that because I see these things on Reddit.
The sane space.
Yes, it's where all the sane people go. And yeah, so I see these things on Reddit and I'm just like, I disagree. That
Yeah,
doesn't seem correct.
because it's
But
not.
okay.
Go off, king, because it's usually a
I'm
king.
curious though, Hannah, because you were saying that you watched all the X-Men stuff. So you think that was kind of your entry point into the superhero
Oh, my
stuff?
entry point was definitely X-Men cartoons and Spider-Man cartoons growing up.
Okay.
There was original Spider-Man animated series that was wild. It was so wild. Like I forget how long
Is
it
that where the
ran
meme
for.
came from?
No, 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 no. That's like earlier iterations.
Okay.
This was a much more mainstream Spider-Man when it was like a 90s one. And um he like there's going to be a new Madam Web movie coming out, and a lot of people don't know Madam Web because there's no entry point in the actual film industry of her. So unless you were like a fan of the comic books or a fan of one of these cartoons, you're not as well versed in Madam Web, who is like this seer who was like blind, and she like was in a different realm, and she was kind of like Peter Parker's guide, and they're about to make a
Okay.
movie about Madam Web, so that's going to be super interesting. um and the Mary Jane in there, I remember I hated her outfit so much, Laura. It was so ugly. It was like it was one of those things where it was like one of the first redheads I had seen on TV, even though that's the
Okay.
joke is lots of stuff have redheads, but like she was an actress who was a redhead, so she was like very popular and she was supposed to be very sexy, and they gave her these awful, awful 90s bangs and a
Mhm.
terrible outfit. Um and like that was I know so much about Spider-Man because I grew up on those. It was my one of my oldest sister's favorite animated series. She like did artwork projects on it in high school. She loved those. And I remember at one point it was like a huge turning point because like Peter Parker marries Mary Jane, and then all
Mhm.
of a sudden he finds out like half a season later that she's a clone. She's not the actual Mary Jane, and the Mary Jane is
Oh
lost in
no.
another dimension, and he has to like go find her. And I like remember that specifically because the clone Mary Jane has these powers that she accidentally uses and she doesn't know why. Um, so I was a huge fan of that animated series. And then they had an X-Men animated series that is like a lot more true to a lot of the comic books. So like the Rogue, have you seen any of the X-Men films?
I've seen Wolverine.
Okay.
Some of the like older Hugh Jackman stuff. I could not tell you what happens in them
No, that's
though.
okay. But like the original, like the movies kind of go off on their own tangent. Like they have their own storylines and everything. And there are like some things they bring in from the comic books, but specifically like Rogue is my favorite X-Men character because I grew up with the cartoons, and she was like super cool and badass, and she could like fly, and she's the X-Men who can absorb other people's powers.
Okay.
Um, but if she isn't careful, she can kill someone because she like sucks out their
Hmm.
life energy, and that's so she can never touch people. It's like a huge like gift and a curse because she's one of the
Okay.
most like powerful X-Men because of what she can do. But there's a huge run on, sorry to go on, no one asked for this, but if you guys are
I
interested,
mean,
I'm
I
going to,
did.
you did,
So
but so you're going to hear so much about X-Men that you didn't want. But Rogue is one of my favorite characters. There's a huge storyline in the comic books and in the cartoon series where she originally was evil. She like was adopted by one of the most evil people, and she was raised to think that they were the good guys. And her quote unquote mother, who's like one of the best villainesses of all time, convinced her, I believe it was Miss Marvel, to like take all of Miss Marvel's powers, but Rogue held on for too long because the whole point of Rogue is she can only keep someone's powers for a certain amount of time. But she held on long enough to like put this superhero in a coma and pretty much
okay.
make it so she could never resurface. And I can't remember if this is both the comic books or just the cartoon series, but in the cartoon series, she absorbs so much of her powers. Like that's how she has the ability to fly. She has like the Miss Marvel, like psychic energy power kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, but because she did this, she accidentally like absorbed a lot of this woman's memories. So she has to relive
Okay.
like like points of trauma for this woman and know that like this woman is inside her head and she like was this woman's downfall, and she like fights a lot with that. That's actually what turned her good, was going through that and like having her mother ask her to do that. And then she turns over and she starts working with the X-Men. So she's like one of my favorite characters of all time. And she was in the original cartoon series. The cartoon series is very wacky, but like lots of people love it. And one of the upcoming films, there's like Easter eggs about it. So like it's supposed to be getting revamped because it's such a beloved animated series. And that was my entry point into comics. Like I loved those. So then like,
and did you read all the comics and stuff too when
I
you were
didn't
younger?
read all of the comics when I was younger, but like when the internet was around, I did deep dives into backstories and like I googled a ton because we didn't have like a ton of like comic book capabilities when we were younger. Like it just wasn't as well known. And I like never went to comic book shops, so I didn't read as much of the comics, but I have researched a lot of the comics because I find the X-Men especially like the most fascinating of the groups because they're messy of shit. And if you go back into some of our old episodes, I have done my Scott Cyclops rant where like everyone thinks he's like the bastion of amazingness and beauty and grace. And he was actually a terrible, terrible man who married his wife's clone, had a child with her, and then when the original wife came back, he deserted the clone and his child because the original was better in his mind. That is an actual storyline in X-Men.
I don't like that.
Like, he's terrible, but like a lot of the like movies and stuff and like even the cartoons were like, well, he and Jean are meant to be together, and it's like, yeah, if you look into those, like poor Jean.
Yeah.
So yeah, those comics are really messy. Lots of them have random like things. And the movies, I loved the movies growing up. They were like huge for me. As an adult, I could recognize like some of them are better than others.
Sure.
But I preferred those growing up. And then I actually skipped Iron Man and Iron Man 2 for the longest time when I was watching the Marvel movies. I think I started with Captain America and I continued on from there, and then eventually went back and watched Iron Man. But I actually thought the Iron Man movies were really boring. And so it took me a long time to actually watch those. And I think
they have quite a bit of action. So I can see how that would be something that you're just like, nope.
Yeah, it was really boring. I thought the pacing was really off when I first watched it. Like I think I was watching it in the background and I was like, I have no interest in this. So I skipped like Thor and Iron Man for the longest time, and then like went back and watched them for the first time like 5 years ago. But that's probably why you and I are both in the like anti-Iron Man, because it's like he started it, and I was like, not for me. You can skip those.
I mean, I'm trying to think what the first Marvel movie I watched was, and I can't recall honestly. And I don't know, but I have been trying to watch everything kind of in timeline order so that I'm not as confused when I'm watching a new movie, just because it's like they jump all over the place. But I think I enjoy the Captain America storylines a little bit more than some of the other ones.
Yeah.
And I just don't like it when Captain America is with the Avengers because he becomes kind of a downer.
He's so bad in that. Well, that's also like
I've said it before, but he's too much of a goody two shoes.
Well, have you and I gone into that? The like one of the Avengers movies was directed by the guy who made Buffy, and that's actually a very
Which one?
The second Avengers movie, I think.
Age of Ultron.
Yes. So Age of Ultron was directed by,
which I actually liked Age of Ultron. People are like, that's the worst Avengers.
Well, it's like, but if you hate Captain America in that one, that's specifically like it gets flack for making Captain America very one-dimensional. And that was directed by Joss Whedon, who is the creator of Buffy, and that's actually a huge pitfall he falls into, because he's kind of he's a toxic nerd bro. So like anyone who is like muscular or more manly, he always makes kind of a buffoon, and he always does like,
because heaven forbid people be multifaceted.
And he always does like their nerdy downtrodden like billionaire so like those are like the Tony Stark in Age of Ultron, where he's like, I'm just a billionaire genius, blah, 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 blah. You know, and it's like it's just Joss Whedon like being like, "Are I
Yeah.
amazing? I'm so awesome! Like, look at
Let's
how great I
forget about the
am."
fact that Iron Man is a nepo baby and also
Yeah,
in great shape too and
right.
very attractive.
So,
Okay.
yeah, let's forget that it's literally Robert Downey Jr. Okay, but like, yeah,
Yeah.
Joss, and a lot has come out about how toxic Joss Whedon is as a person.
Mm.
And so this is kind of like, it's like the quiet part was happening out loud. And if you've rewatched Buffy, like there's a character called Xander in it who's awful.
Mhm.
And he was definitely like the Joss Whedon insert who's like, isn't he so great? And it's like, not really. And like, he's kind of a dick. And he also directed the Avengers movies. So that's probably why you're
Okay.
getting the original Avengers. So he directed the Avengers and then Avengers Age of Ultron. So that's
Yeah, so that's
probably
probably
where
why
you're
I'm
picking
like,
up on.
I don't like Captain America in those, but I
Yeah,
like him all the other times.
it's
So,
specifically because of Joss Whedon, probably.
well, that guy
So
sucks. So,
yeah, so fun.
bad take.
But I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel. So
I've
yeah,
never
that's
seen those, and I see so many people talking about them and how much they love them, and they're just another thing that's off my radar.
I also loved Dollhouse, but I wonder, like, watching it back, how good that'll be. Dollhouse was a really messed up sci-fi
Hmm.
that was created by Joss Whedon, where it has like humans who sell themselves or get kidnapped into this facility, and they kind of become like avatars of different people, um, for like use of like sex work and
Mm.
like games and like whatever they feel like. Um, and it's like this company that hires out human beings to wealthy clients, and it's a really messed up show, and it was really fascinating. But knowing some of his more toxic thoughts, I wonder what a rewatch of that would be like.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
But it's a really good show, and it was canceled too soon. But you know, what are you gonna do?
Yeah,
Random
my superhero
things.
journey is very different, I guess. And I watched the Michael Keaton Batmans and really loved them
Oh
because
yeah,
those were something that my parents really liked. So they whenever those would come on, we would watch those and I remember really enjoying them. And I still enjoy them. I think that they're
those are
fun,
fun.
fun
Those are
movies.
good.
So
Like, yeah.
and I think that probably I'm gonna just cement those in my brain forever as like my favorite Batman movies, and there's just no arguing with me on that. So
I think that those are actually really good ones, and like people, they're like perfect camp. They're perfect fun.
mhm.
Nicole Kidman, or not Nicole Kidman, what's her name?
From Grease
Who's
2, you
Catwoman?
mean?
Yeah, Michelle Pfeiffer.
Yeah.
It's a bird and then lets it out of her mouth.
Yeah. Like
how
a
how
lot
could you
of
not love
I
that?
mean, Danny DeVito's Penguin in Batman Returns, and we have Jack Nicholson as the Joker in Batman. So like I don't know, there's just pretty decent casting, I thought, and it's just a fun movie. I really liked it. Really
Agreed.
like both of them actually. But it's different to like jump into, like you said, we didn't really have as much, and maybe this is just because of like location, because I you and I both lived like in the country.
Right.
So we didn't have as much access to just be like, oh, I'm gonna go walk a couple blocks to go to the comic book store. Like I know that sounds stupid to just be like, oh, we can't do that. But like even now it's like a jaunt for me to be like, oh, I'm going to a nice library. I have to
Hmm.
drive 20 minutes to a nice library. And because
Well,
like
if we
my
had to
closest
pay,
local library is nice, but they don't have as many availability
well,
options for books and stuff like that. So
and I lived in an area where I had to like pay for a library card because I wasn't in
I
like
do
any
too.
township. So like
Hmm.
I had to pay like I think it was like $75 or something. So
It
like there were
is.
certain years my mom was like, "Hey, you're not getting a library card. Like you have to deal
Hmm.
with your school library." And so you were even more limited. So,
Yeah, that was my situation as well, where honestly, like when I was littler, I think my mom got a library card for us. And
mhm,
then, like, once we were able to use the school library more, then it was a situation where it's like, no, you're using the school library.
right.
There's more books there that you can check out. And then if there were occasionally like books that we weren't getting from the library, we would get them for Christmas or something like that
Mhm.
as presents. And so honestly did not use the library a ton. And I I do think that maybe rural communities have a little less access to some of the benefits that libraries have. So like whenever sometimes people on Bookstagram I've noticed will scream about like, why aren't people using their libraries? And it's like, well, it's a little more nuanced than that because a lot of people don't have the access. And I know like for me personally, my closest local library doesn't have a lot of the offerings that some of the libraries like 20 minutes away that are bigger and have more funds do.
Right.
So you have to, luckily in Illinois is wonderful. We have the Rails system where if you have a library card at one library in Illinois, you can use it at any library in Illinois. So you can, I have a library card that I got from my local library, my closest local library, and I can use it at the one that's 20 minutes away and check out things there. And then I honestly utilize Libby the most out of my library card. That's probably what I use my library card the most is Libby. Most for is Libby. But I think that there's a little bit of a like misunderstanding of how accessible libraries are to certain people. And if you live in rural America, like you don't have the opportunity to always like just drop in at the library all the time. A lot of times libraries don't have the best hours around here and they are hard to get to if you're working or like they don't have as many books because they don't get as much funding, that kind of thing. So, and they tend to focus their funding on children, which makes sense. We want to develop readers, but at the same time, you're not going to be able to find like more recent books, that kind of thing. And definitely not going to be finding comics or things like that. But you and I also probably did not have access to like comic books and stuff like that for the similar reasons, because there were no grocery stores, even let alone a comic book store. So, and if you wanted to find a comic book store, you had to drive quite a ways. So it was a rare find. And so I think that that's kind of maybe for you and I shaped a little bit of our comic book and like comics and superhero journeys, is that we maybe didn't have the access to these places because we weren't getting, or I guess we just didn't have the access to these places because we weren't able, and then we weren't able to get the reading material. So if we did encounter anything, it was going to be through movies.
Right.
But yeah, that was just a long superhero jaunt. And but yeah, I am still watching Marvel.
I haven't heard an update yet. So you take breaks.
I do take breaks, and I think it's just one of those things. I don't think it's something I can just keep watching and watching and watching those, because honestly, the movies are so flippin' long.
They're so long.
Like I think that Thor Ragnarok was well over 2 hours.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They just get longer.
They look like they just keep getting longer, because I think the next one in line is Ant-Man and the Wasp. And I looked at it and I was like, well, how long is this one? And I was like, really? It's 2.5 hours? Like, Scott Lang's not even that interesting. How can he be another 2.5 hour movie? Like, come on, what are we doing here? And I'm also bad about like if a movie is going to be too long, if it's past a certain point in the night, I'm like, well, it's going to be too close to my bedtime, so I am not going to be able to do it. Oh, yeah. So Marvel, like, reel it in with how long these movies are. They're so long.
We need to get back to more efficient time stuff, like we just do.
Yeah. I think that's probably a reason why TV is kind of in a golden age, because it's a lot more consumable to just watch a 20 to 30 minute show or an hour long show versus watching a 3-hour movie.
Well, you're about like 4 away from getting into TV shows, Laura. Like,
I know, I'm excited for the TV shows.
I'm excited for you to get into those too, because I think some of those are really, really great. So
yeah, I'm excited for WandaVision. I'm excited for Loki, and then is it Moon Knight?
Moon Knight is really good. Well, there's like a couple, because there's WandaVision, and then there's Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that one.
And then
I like Anthony Mackie, so
you don't have to do What If technically, but it is fun to do. It's the cartoon one. And then you have Moon Knight, and then you have She-Hulk, which I actually very much liked. But
my cousin is a big Marvel fan, and he like a huge Marvel fan, and he told me that he would recommend watching What If, because he says that it plays with the timelines a little bit, and you get some more interesting like creative processes that come through in that. And
Yeah.
he's like, I don't think you should skip it. I think you should definitely watch, because I was just going to skip it.
I mean, that's fair.
But he kind of convinced me that maybe I should
But,
watch it.
but I haven't watched Werewolf by Night, and I
Mm.
started Secret Invasion, but like kind of forgot about it.
Mm-hmm.
I watched the opening, and then I was like, oh yeah, I have something else to
Which
do, and
that one
walked
has my
away.
favorite characters, so I might have to watch that.
It does have your favorite character, so I totally get that. Yeah.
But yeah, superhero journey continuing. I think that it's like hard for me to remember at the moment because we took such a long break from like talking about anything we've been watching. So I I have watched so many things that it's just like my brain is overloaded. So I was just like, what have I watched recently? So those were two movies that I've watched recently, Thor Ragnarok and D&D, and I like both of them.
Oh,
So,
good.
but Hannah, something that I read recently, like very recently, I just finished it yesterday, read it in one day. Crying in H Mart by
Oh,
Michelle Zauner.
all the tears in the world, and I haven't
Oh
even
my
read
gosh. It,
it.
this book deserves absolutely every award that it gets and every accolade, all the 5-star reviews. I think that this is like, I know that people have been saying that it's difficult to review memoirs, and I agree with that to an extent, but like when I read Spare, I listened to that and it got to the point where I was just like, this is too long. This is just
Yeah.
too long. And I did feel justified being like, this is not a 5-star book, because there was too much put into it at times that I was just like, okay, I totally appreciate someone, sharing more intimate details of their lives, but it's it was too long. But this book I thought was like absolutely perfect. It was a beautiful look into a woman's relationship with her mother, with herself, with her spouse, and how she gained a greater understanding of herself and her mother through her mother's death. And I just thought it was absolutely beautiful. A great reflection on what it's like to be a Korean American, to be a biracial person, to have a relationship with your culture and food, and to still have a fractured relationship with your parent after they're gone, and to try and work on developing a stronger relationship with the parent you have remaining, and how that relationship changes, and how your relationships within your family, the whole family dynamic changes when someone passes away. And I just thought it was such a beautiful book, and I think that Michelle Zauner is an incredibly talented writer. Like this is a very raw book. She says things that, as someone who has not experienced, like, I have not experienced a death in the family of someone in my immediate family, but like my grandfather has died, and that was very hard on me because we were quite close. But I have not experienced like the loss of a parent or a sibling or anything. But to hear some of the confessions that Michelle made in this book, and to hear her say them listening to the audiobook, was very emotional. And a lot of these things were things that I have thought about. And she admitted that some of these things were disgusting thoughts that she had, and it's so relatable to have similar thoughts about yourself and your family and your relationship with death. And I just think that if you are in the right space, I think that everyone should read this book, and it's absolutely worthy of all of the praise and all of the 5-star reviews and awards and everything that it gets. Michelle is so talented, and it's amazing that this book came to be because of just a essay that she had written for a magazine. So, or maybe it was for, I can't remember if it was for a magazine or a newspaper, but it started out as just an essay for one of them, and then they encouraged her to write a whole book on it. So, absolutely wonderful book.
Good. I own that book, but I have yet to read it because my mom died almost exactly 3 years ago to the day, and I'm like, nope, no, thank you. I think it would be a very emotionally raw, and
it is.
As someone who just had a conversation with two other women last night about the loss of our mothers, it's just randomly you find each other at a party, and people do not understand the weird morbidity of like being able to be like, oh my god, your mom died too, my mom died, because like it seems weird from the outside looking in, but
Sure.
uh like there is a weird connection you have when I always like whenever one of my friends loses a parent, I'm always like, welcome to the club that no one wants to be in and everyone wants to leave. Like,
Sure.
but and you can never leave. So, but like each parental loss is like uniquely terrible, is what I
Mm-hmm.
found. But they're all very like similar in building community where you understand like that the person has been through unspeakable pain. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure writing about that was very difficult for her.
And
And like,
it
yeah,
was another layer too, because her mother dealt with cancer
yeah,
and it was a long illness, and
mhm,
she ended up being caretaker for her mother
yeah,
towards the end of her illness. And it was really heartbreaking to see the complicated emotions that were happening for Michelle during that, and how she reacted to her father, and how she honestly just internalized a lot of the things that happened during that time as well.
yeah,
So I shout out to all caretakers,
yeah,
honestly, because they don't get enough credit for all of the, whether you're a caretaker for a parent, a spouse, a child, and anyone, honestly. I cannot give enough thanks to people who are caretakers, because
yeah,
they have such emotional and physical and such burdens that
yeah,
they have to take on, and they are so strong and do this all the time to, because they love people and they care for people. So thank you to caretakers.
yeah,
But
exactly.
that was another interesting aspect of the book too. But yeah, it's I always find myself drawn to reflections of relationships and of grief in books. And I think that's why I tend to say that contemporary fiction is my favorite genre, because it deals more with these kinds of topics of questioning relationships and looking at grief, whether it's the loss of someone that you love or the loss of something in your life. I find that contemporary fiction just kind of hits me in a way that other books do not. And this was a memoir, obviously, so it's nonfiction, but dealt with so many of the themes that I find myself drawn to in contemporary fiction.
Yeah.
Hannah, what have you been reading and watching?
Uh, Literally on the side of the same coin, but incredibly different, or on the same coin, but other side. I
Mm-hmm.
read I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy.
Okay.
Very different vibe. But also deals with like the loss of a mother.
Mm-hmm.
And like it looks at the toxicity of a narcissistic parent, because I don't
Yeah.
think there's any arguments there, even though her mother was never diagnosed, that her mother was a narcissist just based on a lot of her actions and a lot of the way she treated Jeanette. It was a very interesting book. I feel a lot of different ways about it because I think
Mm-hmm.
this is a very fascinating book. I think a lot of people got a lot of stuff out of it, but I also feel like this is written during a time where I wonder if Jeanette would have written the same book in 10 years. It feels like she hasn't quite processed some of her like
I
I
feel like this book was so raw because it was her working through all of this.
yes.
It almost feels like, I think that's why a lot of people connected with this, because it feels like a journal.
Yeah, but I also like I'm always very careful when someone is still processing and then like I'm just much more careful about the way therapy is sometimes used.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it held me back from loving this so much because like therapy is very much about learning to exist, or at least my experience with therapy. I will
Mm-hmm.
not speak for other people, but like based on my experience, so based on my reading of this book, like therapy is very much about learning how to exist with what's happened to you,
Mm-hmm.
and like learning that it wasn't okay, but you can be okay, and I, there was just parts of this book that like it felt like she hadn't fully gone through what she needed to with therapy yet. Um, and there are still parts of like I call it ego getting involved. Like sometimes
Mm-hmm.
when something bad has happened to us, our ego gets involved and we become like a little bit more like bitter or quick to react or something. And it just felt that way sometimes reading the book.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so sometimes I'm always just like, I'm concerned when people have reactions like that, just because it's like, oh, I hope you're still processing, because I don't want this to be like a feedback loop of like this book was so popular and so well received that it's like, oh, you have nothing left to learn. It's like I hope she knows that like there's still plenty to learn and like
Mm-hmm.
plenty to process.
Yeah,
Because
I don't get the
yeah,
impression that she is going to like stop her journey of growth after her mother's death. I think a lot of it to me was her kind of coming to terms with what actually happened. And I think sometimes when you say things out loud, the way that she did with this, it's kind of like, yeah, so it seemed normal at the time, but now I'm realizing it wasn't normal that these things happened with my mom.
Yeah.
And a lot of it came off that way to me, where
I don't disagree with any of that. I think I'm just more like there were parts of it that held me back from loving this book as much. And I
sure.
was still very concerned for her in many ways. But like that's just my take on it. It could be because I don't think you're wrong, and I don't think people who love this book are wrong. There were just moments that made me like
Did you listen to the
concerned.
book?
Yes, I listened.
Yeah,
So
I think that's the better format.
yeah, I do think that's the better format than reading it. I didn't read it. I'm probably I mean listening is reading, but
Mhm.
yeah, I think listening to her own words and how she read it
Yeah.
was good. But I'm also not a huge memoir person, so that could have also been like different for me. Probably it's like you said, like you're more used to reading memoirs and you're more used to like the
Hmm.
messiness of them, and I'm not as used to them. So
Yeah, I really
that could be
enjoy
my own
memoirs,
feeling.
especially in the audio format, because it to me is nice to hear the words in the person's own voice.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times it's not just like they're reading it monotone off a page. They say it the way that they would have. And I know listening to that book specifically, Jeanette kind of breaks down at
Mm-hmm.
one point, which
Yeah.
was a difficult moment. And I'm assuming that what happened was they just said, we're not going to redo this. You're just going to leave it the way that it is.
Yeah.
We'll not edit that. We'll just leave it. And I thought that was kind of a good choice, but I appreciate some of the emotions that come through via audio format with memoirs because
Yeah.
I just don't think that you get that as much when you're reading the physical copy.
I do really appreciate her ending like kind of talk with Carly about the iCarly reboot and like her kind of moving forward after this. I
Hmm.
thought that that was very well done.
Yeah,
Um
I think that she is kind of just at a point where she's just like, I'm not doing it anymore. iCarly, I don't really know a lot of the drama that went on with that. It sounds like that creator of that show was awful
yeah.
and that he should not be around children.
Mm-hmm.
And I really hope that some of the people, that maybe had a different experience than Jeanette and kind of maybe are turning their heads like, oh, that didn't happen to me, so it can't be true. I hope that they'll maybe not be as closed-minded about some of these
Yeah.
things because that's kind of a vibe that I got. But again, I don't know a lot of this celebrity drama related to this specific cast. I don't know that I really watched much iCarly. I think it was something I maybe watched a couple episodes, but I wasn't really that into it.
I was never a huge Nickelodeon person.
I was always about Disney.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was me.
Um yeah, I was just never a huge Nickelodeon fan. So I did watch Zoe 101. He was also a creator of that. He was also just
Mm,
like, how did he get to create so much? Because he
yeah.
created a lot. Like he was a huge name because
Hmm.
he did Drake and Josh, he did Zoe 101, iCarly, Victoria, Sam and Cat, Henry Danger, he was a co-creator, Game Shakers, The Adventure of Kid Danger, Danger Force.
I think it's
Um,
also a thing too that we need to quit doing this thing where if one show is successful, we give that person that helped create that show like a million properties to create and just, let's increase competition here. It always helps. I
yeah,
We don't need to have the same person making 5,000 shows.
no. And so and he seems like, yeah, not a great guy. There's been lots of allegations
Hmm.
from Zoe 101, people about bullying, just like there's a certain brand of person who gets around kids and like thinks that they're a kid themselves, which is also incredibly
Yeah.
dangerous. Like uh, it's one of those things where something also blew up on TikTok recently about like teachers who quote unquote flirt with their male students.
Yeah,
And it's like,
inappropriate.
and I had teachers who were inappropriate with students, like not even like flirting, but just like
Hmm.
inappropriate relationships, were catty, like we're very much like, I'm a popular teacher, I'm a cool teacher. And it's just like,
Yeah.
I don't know if you should be a teacher if you care about being cool.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it always weirds me out when like adults feel insulted by 18 to 20-year-olds. And I'm like, those are, or like even 14 to 20-year-olds when they're like, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
like when the whole middle part with everything came out. I was just like, why do you care about what a child thinks of you? Like, no
I will
offense, but
say
like,
though, Hannah, I substitute taught for a number of years, fairly recently, like before the pandemic, and
mhm.
I had a very hard experience when I was in junior high and high school settings because kids can be really, really mean.
Oh
Like
yes, kids can be
you try to
mean.
put the absolute minimum expectations on them. Like, can you please work on your homework and turn it in so that I don't have to walk you through every single exam question because you didn't do any of your homework and don't know how to do it? And granted, this is a advanced math class, and they would not care about doing that at all, and they would call you very bad names, like very bad names that were not
Okay, but
deserved.
here's
So
the
I'm
thing.
like a almost 30-year-old coming home crying because eighth graders called me a bad name, and I'm like, I didn't deserve that.
But here's the thing. Also, adults treat me that way at my job now. So, like,
Oh, I'm not saying that adults don't treat me poorly at my
right.
job.
But there's a difference between like getting hurt by a person by being like mean and actually awful to you, and someone just having an opinion, and then you be like, no, where it's like, why
Yeah,
why do you care about a child's opinion? Like they are a child.
yeah.
Like be the adult in the room, understand that you're older and like get over it kind of thing. Like I just think that there's a weird mentality and I feel like that creator perpetuated that with the fact that it's like I'm a cool guy. I love this. And it's like, no, you're
I
an
think there's also
adult.
just like a weird thing that people get into where they, because I've noticed this about, this is something I've noticed about like women that are close to my mom's age that are, because my mom is very much not like this. So, and something that I really appreciate about my mom is that she's not about like trying to look young and hip all
Mm-hmm.
the time. She has her very own like unique style and brand, and she does not care what people think of her. And I so much appreciate that about her because I've noticed several people like in our community that I know that are very obsessed with looking young and
Mm-hmm.
being young, and like the way that they dress, they're kind of like picking up on the trends that like young people are wearing and things like that. And that's fine to like go with fashion trends, but it gets
Right.
to a point where you hear women like talking at a restaurant, like women that are in their 50s, and they're talking about who looks younger, and I put on this cream and that cream so I can look young. And it's just like I feel like that we've as a society have kind of done this to people where we've like triggered this need to constantly be young, and it goes farther into not only do you have to always look young, but for some people you have to act young and be
That's
accepted
fair.
by younger people in order to like feed this whatever it is and that has been
Yeah.
put into our brains.
Yeah. That's very true.
It's
But
not healthy, but it
no, it's not
exists.
healthy, but it exists. But yeah, so I thought that book was fascinating. I didn't dislike the book. I gave it 4 stars, but there were just like something
Sure.
holding me back from being like, this is the best book ever. Um, but for watching, Laura, I started this today. Again, this is the week of my mom's death, so full disclosure, I am in a hair bonnet right now and not doing great. But I like kind of got sad today and I couldn't think of what to do, so I just turned on Our Flag Means Death.
Zeth. I've heard
Another
so many people talking about it.
another Taika Waititi joint. This show is hilarious. It's so good. It's about this man who was like he grew up as a gentleman. He was kind of like down, like beat down for being kind of like not the stereotypical male
Mhm.
in life. And you find out kind of in the first episode that he ran away to like become a pirate pretty much, and he is a
Okay.
pirate captain and he is awful at it. Um, but it's hilarious in like a very Taika Waititi way, where like in the first episode, he's like, "I'd like to show you what I'm doing for my ship. I like to keep morale high." And he's like, "So we have a rec room and we have this," but they like never pirate, and all the pirates are like, "We just want to murder people." And he's like, "But I pay them a salary and I make sure they're well fed." And they're like, "Yeah, we'd rather torture people." So
So is it very much like a What We Do in the Shadows feel to it?
yeah, definitely. It's definitely like along that brand. And it's just very good. I like it so much. It's very funny. I've watched 3 episodes and I'm like, yeah, this is exactly what I needed. Like I am laughing out
Oh,
loud.
good.
And some of the like there's an episode where they're at. This is a small spoiler, but like not too big. There's an episode where they have to like go to this like island full of pirates, and he's wearing all white, and he made the guy who like writes his journal wear all white, and the guy's like, I'm not sure about this type of clothing for here. And he's like, it's a showing of power. If you're dressed more important, they believe you're more important. And then a pirate comes up to like the scribe and falls on him, and blood goes down the guy's coat. And the scribe is like, and he goes, you couldn't have sidestepped. And it's very absurdist humor, and I died laughing. So yeah, that's been a bright spot in my day. It's very good.
I know
like
the second season
said.
just came out, so everyone's been talking about it and saying how wonderful it is, and I have FOMO because anytime someone comes out on HBO or Apple TV, I'm like, no.
I just I'll see you this weekend, and I can help you watch it. So yeah, so it's been fun watching that. So that's what I've been reading, watching, and or enjoy. Oh, and for like short movies, it is October when we're recording this. My partner and I did a trade-off movie where we watched Treasure Planet because I had never seen it before.
I love Treasure Planet.
It's very cute, very wholesome, very stacked cast for no reason.
Yeah.
But that was very cute. And then we watched Practical Magic, and talk about a
I love
movie
that
that
one
is
too.
not long. Like we were watching it, and I was like, this is a tight hour and 40 minutes. And like there's a lot that happens in that movie if you're not used to like the way we draw out like 2 hour, where it's like if you're not paying attention, you will miss someone randomly saying something offhand, and then it is incredibly important to the plot.
Right.
You're just watching it, and they're like, at one point, she's like, "Oh, that like." I was watching it, and the ants are like, we never thought when we cast the spell that you'd actually fall in love with him. And I remember for the longest time, like it took me forever as a child, because I watched this movie since I was a child, to realize like they had cast a love spell on her, just because it's like such an aside, like 2-line reading. And if you're not listening, you do not know that that happened. Like,
Right.
it's so good though. It's such a well done movie.
That movie is fantastic. And somebody was talking about it on Bookstagram the other day. I can't remember who, but they were saying that on Rotten Tomatoes it has a super low score, and I'm like, Rotten Tomatoes is not a good indicator of if a movie or TV show is good.
That is such a good movie. They do not waste a single line. It is like you are moving through things quickly. Like it's just so well done. And like we got done, and I thought my partner was going to be like, yeah, of course you like them. Like when he watched Labyrinth, he did not appreciate it as much as I appreciate Labyrinth. Fine, whatever. Now we have 2 prints on our wall about the Labyrinth, but that's just me. But he was like, I would give this like an A- movie. That was actually very good. And I was like, oh, good. This is a good movie. So love that. Love to see that. And we were just talking about how long movies were. And I was like, yeah, we just watched Practical Magic. Because we both made jokes. I made a joke about Treasure Planet where it's like, dude, this is like moving so fast. In the first 5 minutes, like someone is already dead. And then we started watching Practical Magic, and he's like, Hannah, you were making fun of my movie for being very fast paced. Like...
I will say somebody said recently to me, like, oh, I've never read Treasure Island. I wonder if I should read it. And I was like, just watch Treasure Planet.
I did read Treasure Island when I was a child. I don't know why.
Or watch Muppets Treasure Island.
Yeah. It's not a great book. Like, it's just kind of a long classic.
Well, and
like,
that was the thing that somebody was talking about it, and they're like, oh, I've never read Treasure Island. I wonder if I should read it. And another person said, well, I read it, and I can't tell you a thing about it. I just don't think that I remember reading certain books, to which then it brought me into the conversation of, well, you know, if you enjoyed it at the time, it doesn't matter if you remember all the details and everything. You can still just read for the enjoyment at the time. But it is what it is. If somebody needs to remember all the details, I guess. But but yeah, it was like, oh yeah, I think you can just probably, if you don't want to read Treasure Island, just watch Treasure Planet and Muppets Treasure Island.
I mean, it is like Treasure Planet. I watch it and I was like, I remember some of this book, and yes, that is this book. It's just in space.
Yes.
Yeah. It's random cook taking kid under his wing, and then he'd be bad. Like that's like, it.
Oh, we didn't expect him to be a bad guy, but he is. But oh wait, there's some gray area here because he's not totally bad, and you know, a lot of the things that he was saying he actually believes. And yeah, it's I need to watch that again because I haven't watched that in so long. That is a great movie.
It was very enjoyable. So, but with that said, should we talk about another book featuring androids and sec units and such?
Yes. We need to
So
talk about Murderbot.
and the system collapse and Murderbot's system collapse. Oh.
Mm-hmm.
So this book is a lot of processing trauma.
Yeah.
It, I really love that, like in this book, we see a lot of like Murderbot coming to the understanding that parts of it are human, or parts of it,
Sure.
like we always talk about how Murderbot is a huge dissection of humanity because it's like
Mm-hmm.
the most human that is a non-human in the situation. But there are parts of this book that kind of bring that forward with the fact that like Murderbot has unprocessed trauma. A lot of its past is catching up with it. And then it has moments with art where it's like, I don't know what happened to me. And art's like, well, parts of you are human. So you had a human reaction. And
Mm-hmm.
that is deeply and fundamentally sad, knowing like everything that Murderbot's been through and everything that it believes and feels. It's just very sad.
Yeah, Martha loves to question what makes something human and what makes something a human reaction, what makes something a human process. And she is definitely a student of people
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of this, when we talked to Martha just a little while ago, she had said that she relates a lot to Murderbot and that a lot of the thoughts and things that she was writing about Murderbot helped her to realize things about herself. So I kind of perceive Murderbot as maybe Martha's own self-insert
Mm-hmm.
character, that's how she, reacts to people. And I think that's even more fascinating because when I'm reading Murderbot, I kind of get the idea that Murderbot's trying to figure people out and is like, I don't know if I've got this figured out with this one or that one. Martha seems to have people figured out so well
Mm-hmm.
in the way that they would react to things, in the way that corporations and groups of people would react to things, and how different political entities would react to things. And I think it's fascinating that she finds Murderbot to be someone that is close to her.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is definitely all of these books are such a good look at what humanity truly is and allowing readers to question things.
Mm-hmm.
And we can definitely pick up on a lot of the relevance
Right.
within system collapse, and a lot of it feels timely. And I know that Martha had recently put up a post about Murderbot, like how she created it because she was so angry about
Mm-hmm.
things, and that she thinks it's interesting when people are dissecting her books that they find all these other themes and stuff, because she's like, I wrote this because I was just furious that certain things were going on. It was a book to get my rage out. And I had reshared it and said, well, I think that's why people really relate to this writing, because although there's the rage, you can still get these glimpses of hope and of growth within the
Yeah.
characters and them becoming more human and more relatable and more in tune with their other people that they're interacting with. So I think that all of these things are just like permeating throughout all of Martha's books because I find them in Witch King too.
Well, and I think there's something about that where you're talking about like the humanity of it. And I keep coming back to the word vulnerable. Like these books are very vulnerable. And I think that that's something people forget about when someone shows anger. Like anger is vulnerability, love is vulnerable. Big emotions are
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable because, like,
Yeah.
that's what people like. People who say someone is quote unquote emotional, they're always like, well, you're supposed to be logical. You're supposed to be like straightforward, straight laced, don't have any reactions. And that's what Murderbot thinks.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, as time goes on, Murderbot like can't do that anymore because so much has happened to it. So much is going on around it. And it has like more love for people that it like barely
Mm-hmm.
understands, but it knows that it loves these people. And then it gets others to trust it through vulnerability. Like it has to
Yeah.
open itself up to, let me ask hard questions. Let me show you what my life has been like. And
Let
when
me let you help me.
yes. And like, that's so beautiful in this book. I was so like flabbergasted the moment where the
Mm-hmm.
way they get past the corporation is just like showing people what happened to others and telling a story because like that is how people learn, is from
Yeah.
others being vulnerable about themselves and share. Like you and I just shared two different memoirs.
Hmm.
People learn so much through memoirs and through sharing of stories and telling these things. And like that is vulnerability, that you're just like opening yourself up to that kind of acceptance or criticism in that way. And like Murderbot of like 7 books ago could never, like, it would have been horrified at telling anyone
Sure.
about it. But as time has gone on, like it's learned from others that like people genuinely feel for Murderbot and want to be there for it. And it may hate that feeling, but it led it to this space of like, well, I guess I have to trust others and I have to show them because like my story is important enough, even if I don't want to share it.
Yeah. I think too with Murderbot in this book, even though we are getting a lot of that growth that you mentioned, Hannah, there is still room for more. And
Yeah.
this was something that we had asked Martha about. I'm going to keep falling back on this because we talked a little bit about system collapse with Martha. So if you haven't listened to our interview episode, what are you doing? Go back and
Yeah.
listen.
Go back.
But
It's right there for you. Come on.
it's right there. The Queen is telling us about these books. But I think that there's still a lot of room for growth with Murderbot in at least at this point. We've seen Murderbot do so much and learn so much and get a greater understanding of people and itself.
Mhm.
And I think that it's not done.
Yeah.
There's still plenty of room to continue. And I think that that's something that's really beautiful, that we don't always just like have a resolution where it's like, now Murderbot is perfect. It's perfect
Hmm.
now. And it's like, no, it might not ever be perfect. It might always just be on a continual journey because we all are.
Right.
And I love that.
I I also love that, like, you're right. This is the beginning of Murderbot's journey, but it's also such an accurate way to show this kind of journey. Cause, like,
Mhm.
we see that in other people where, like, I know even in myself, like, there are certain times in my life where I'm not ready to share a portion of myself with someone. And, like, I keep it close to my chest and I'm like, I just don't want to yet, or I don't think I should have to. And all of that's true. But then, like, as you grow and as you like get older, there are certain things where it's like, oh, I'm ready to open up to this person. I'm ready to talk to them. And it
Mhm.
always like, and a lot of the times, like it's with people you trust. And then it does make it easier as you continue to grow to like open up more
Mhm.
and more and tell more and more people about what's going on with you. And it does feel like Murderbot's kind of on that
Mhm.
same journey where it's, you know, you and I have talked about in a lot of the previous books where Murderbot's like, it isn't my job to be the bearer of everything. It's not my
Mhm.
job to do this. And everyone's like, no, of course not. But like, it may be something you want to do in the future. And it's like, no, never. And then like in this book, it's like, okay, now is the time to do it. I think it's important enough to save these people and to save this computer system that's waving at me.
Yeah.
Like, it's important enough. So I'm ready to do it. And I'm more willing than I was before.
I think another thing that's interesting about this book specifically is that we have much less of the questioning of Murderbot being a sec unit and being included that we
Hmm.
did in previous books. It now feels as if Murderbot has cemented itself within the crew, you know,
Yeah.
that people are no longer questioning, is this sec unit gonna turn on us? Can we trust this sec unit? What's going on here? And that was kind of refreshing. I don't know if it's just because the group of people we're dealing with is like the university and Mensa's people, or that have dealt with Murderbot for multiple situations, or if it's just that people are just starting to grow and become more accepting.
Yeah.
And hopefully it's the latter. But I found that to be a really refreshing thing about this book too.
I agree. I think it's really nice to not have Murderbot having to like fight for its own like self anymore.
Yes,
Uh,
it's not constantly questioned about every single move it makes.
and I do think it's because of the group of people it's with, where it's like, oh,
Mhm.
a lot of people have like a baseline knowledge. And so like it also shows the how acceptance grows. Like
Yeah.
because everyone in this group is like educated about art, educated about like, and so they're easier to be like, oh, art is a high functioning like unit system, a
Hmm.
ship. And so Murderbot being like a high functioning sec unit, they're like, okay, we can buy into that. And then like Murderbot's people have done a lot of talking to Murderbot and
Hmm.
discussing itself with like what its parameters are. So there's like the moment where someone misidentifies it as a former sec unit and like Murderbot's person is right there to be like, that's not accurate.
Nope.
Murderbot is a sec unit that doesn't stop happening, that doesn't stop being real. And like by saying that, you're invalidating what Murderbot is. And it's like, oh, that's awesome to like have people who just understand Murderbot. And it kind of shows like once you gain a better understanding of things, you're better able to discuss with them and then
be an ally.
And be an ally. And in this book, we have Leonide, who says a bunch of stuff to Murderbot that, like, because we have this group of people who are fully accepting and understanding, when Leonide says what it says, it seems much more ignorant and rude than it has in previous books. Because it's like, wow, you're sitting in a room where everyone thinks you're now an asshole because they've all unlearned this already.
Yeah.
And like,
and that was something that really stood out. It wasn't just like you saying like, oh, it kind of stood out. No, it really stands out because you're just like, wow, this person is terrible. Like this is a big bad in this book. And it's like, honestly, like that particular character did not do like tons of big bad things like on the page, but just those interactions and the few things that were said, it's like, this is an evil person. Like,
but I think that could also teach us a little bit about like how sometimes we as humanity, like once you've grown in a certain way, you get frustrated with those who are coming up behind you, where it's like, how do you not know this already? And like, there does have to be some grace, like, but there is a difference in this book between Leonide, who is being hateful and purposeful and is hateful towards everyone.
There's definitely an agenda too.
Yeah. Versus like Iris, who like says something a little bit like not okay and is like quickly corrected, and then it's like, oh, okay, like I didn't know. Like there is a difference on that end, but it does show like it is humorous to think about because people often learn something and then I'm guilty of this where I'm like, how do you not know that? And it's like, well, maybe Laura didn't Google a bunch of X-Men articles, Hannah, like you did in your childhood.
Everyone has their own unique situation, and I think that like I know you and I both we're at different stages with our own learning and unlearning of different things. And so we, even though we grew up in like similar areas, we had different life experiences. So you can't just say that, oh, you know, like everyone's gonna have the same experience and expect people to be at the same level as you all the time, because sometimes people don't seek out the information, don't have access to the information, or are just unaware and due to life circumstances. So this is, like you said, a good reflection of that.
And so I do think like, and I think Martha Wells would agree, like the most important part is willingness to learn, because a lot of the times I feel like Wells' favorite characters are the people who are willing to be like, oh, I might have been ignorant, but now I am not.
Dr. Mensah style.
Yeah, exactly. Where Dr. Mensah was like, you had a right to leave when you did. I was being rude and I was not understanding you as a complete informed sec unit. Like,
what did you think of the storyline with our like possible colonialism happening here?
I mean, I really loved this storyline because, like I said, I thought, like I've been saying through quite a few of the books, I feel, maybe not on mic, but definitely off mic, where I was often most interested in the way that corporate structure happened.
Yeah.
And the way people would like, you kind of knew Murderbot's feelings going through these books because Murderbot was very much like, oh, they have a contract. At least I have my own identity. These people, or like, at least I had my governor module that was like giving me directions, but like, I didn't have to have like a contract where I was not my own entity that could be loaned out or like couldn't do this on my own. I like these people sign away contracts and their lives are over. And so that was definitely in the last book where you learn about these people who were just like abandoned on this planet. And then to find out that like a corporation wants to swoop in after the fact, which happens in the real world, of corporations swooping in to like buy up stuff after a tragedy. And like seeing that happen on the page, it was just a very good one-to-one of what happens in our real world, and just the way we treat humanity, the way we treat humans who we see as tools and not people. And like, that's where like people, and even with the Leonide character, it's interesting because it's like the people in power, in the upper echelons of power, like they weren't as desperate. but then the people right under them, which is also true, like people who are close to power but not quite in the upper echelons of power are often more aggressive and
Ruthless.
more ruthless because they know that they are one step away from being the people that they're
Yep.
trying to hurt or harm.
Mhm.
So that was also a very accurate way to reflect
Mhm.
that. These people who go to try to kill their supervisor or kill the people around them so that they didn't lose out on the contract, like that is an accurate reflection of the way the world is. And
Mhm.
so I think it's just you can feel a lot of Martha's like own anger towards these types of situations
Yeah.
and her own like vitriol at the way companies treat humans.
Mhm.
Uh, and I just thought it was very well done. What were your thoughts on it?
I actually loved it because I think that we're just getting kind of like tastes of this before where it was
Mm,
mentioned. And this was maybe the first of the books where we dove into this a little more and kind of got a clearer idea of what would happen if X, Y, and Z occurred, or what is going to happen to these people. So I love that because I had said many times, like you had said, oh, I wish we could get more of this, like a deeper dive into this. I'm like, I don't think it's going to happen. They're just novellas. We're just getting glimpses. And I'm really glad that Martha's starting to give us more of this, giving the people what they want.
what what I
And
specifically asked for. Thank you.
thanks for listening.
Yes. Number one fan, Martha Wells.
I would like be so shocked if she
Oh.
actually listened to our podcast. But no, I really appreciated getting to actually see what some of these things look like in this world because before it's just kind of like maybe left a little bit open to interpretation,
Right.
but to see like, no, this is what would happen. These people would literally lose everything. They would
Mm-hmm.
lose everything if this went this way. And the people in corporation do not care. They have a specific goal in mind and they're willing to just kind of throw away resources and people to make it happen because they have endless resources and
Mm-hmm.
people and money. So it's not that big of a deal to them.
Mm-hmm.
But to see other people, coming in and trying to assist and provide information to them to let them know, hey, this could happen. This has happened in the past with these people. And here's what you need to know. You need to protect your culture. You need to protect your people. You need to protect all these things was really nice. I really enjoyed seeing that.
I really liked it too. I thought, and it's just so, like I said, I can't talk enough about the way the the bad guys, like Leonide was terrible, but like the
Mhm.
bad guys ended up being these people who were desperate because of like what capitalism did to them, where
Well,
it's
I
like,
think
oh,
it's interesting that you mentioned that because you had mentioned something previously. I don't know if this was in a Murderbot discussion episode, but I think it was something related to people being fat phobic. Honestly, it was a discussion of weight and how
mm-hmm,
you mentioned that when people lose weight, they close the door
yep,
behind them
mm-hmm,
and they're like, no, I'm no longer part of that. And I think that you can use that door analogy for or metaphor, whatever,
yeah,
for this situation as well, where people find themselves in a position where they have a little more money, a little more power, and they may have previously been in that
yep,
on that other side of the door, and they just close the door behind them because they don't want anyone else to risk their chances of getting back on the other side of that door.
well, and it's also because like there's that weird connotation where it's like, well, if you are just a worker, contractor person, you were weak, you were less than, you are not deserving of your own personhood, like
Yeah.
you are terrible. And so if you got out of that lower echelon and you're suddenly at the next level, you also believe that you were a terrible person and you were just better than them, because if
Mhm.
not, how did you get where you are? And
Exactly.
it's like
You
it's
must have
that
done something to reach that
exact
other people aren't doing.
which they call like the fugue of the American dream, where it's not
Mhm.
and that's like, look,
Yeah.
as someone who just like got into a lower paying job,
Mhm.
and had like I was in very high paying roles in my lifetime and now I am not. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't have a partner. And like, no one's willing to say, like, I didn't do this through my own hard work, where it's like, well, I worked my butt off and then I was able to do exactly the work I wanted to do in exactly the way I wanted to do. It was like, no, I got really lucky. And at the right time, found someone who was willing to work with me on this and willing to let me take a lower paying job. But I think some people want that like pat on the back instead of just saying they got lucky. And it's like, well, that's why people do desperate things for money. People do desperate things for lots of things. And we're not giving them the grace to do that because we want to put some kind of like, you are a quote unquote good person if you're able to get out of poverty, but you were a terrible person if you are in poverty. Like it's a very warped way to view the world.
It's definitely a thing where people want to receive some kind of accolade for their struggles, whether it be through health or finances or whatever it is. People tend to want to get that pat on the back, especially when it's related to career success. And it's a very misguided way to look at it, because I know like in our society right now, we have so many people who are working multiple jobs and are still not making enough money to live. And there are people who would say, well, if they're that desperate for money, wouldn't they just go out and get another job? Or you'd work at McDonald's if you were that desperate. And these are things people say. And the thing is, they don't consider that these people that they're saying, they need to go out and get another job, are already working multiple jobs and still unable to get by. Some people are putting in so much work that it's unrealistic to say just go get another job.
Well, or even on the other end of
them set in place that keep people from making it to the other side of that door.
Well, and even in the things like go get a job at McDonald's, there are people who say that who then don't want service workers to get paid a living wage because they just work at McDonald's. And so you can't say
because they say, oh, well, it doesn't require any knowledge to do that. They shouldn't get paid to do that. It doesn't take a bachelor's degree to work at McDonald's, and they shouldn't get paid. And it's like, okay, but
I have gotten double takes before from telling people that like baristas should make a living wage. Like people will like look at me and do like a double take, and I'm like, it's a job. Why
people should be paid for their skills,
right? Like it doesn't matter. They should be paid a living wage. If we need baristas, why are you arguing
being
against
a barista or somebody that does customer service is a skill. If you are able to, honestly, like I give people who are able to work in food service all the credit in the world, because that would be a terrible job.
I worked at Panera for like 4 months and I couldn't cut it. The morning rush was terrible. It was so busy. Like, and you had to be able to be like, doop, 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 you're done, you're good. Like, and that's just, people don't appreciate that. And like, like I said,
well, and I'm thinking even like within my own job, I do a lot of customer service work, and it is not for me, but I have to do it. But I can't imagine doing it at that level where you are under immense pressure and time pressure as well. And you are dealing with people's food, which they are very particular about. Even if it's just a McDonald's hamburger, people get very particular about that kind of stuff. So but then it goes into the whole thing of like you said, oh, people aren't willing to pay people for that. But it's a definite skill to be able to do all of those things and to be so involved in so many different areas, because this is definitely a multitasking type of job and work. I just can't even imagine doing something like I would be
to like
terrible
bring
at it.
Back to the book, like you have all these people who are able to survive on a hostile planet with only ag bots. Like they dealt with the fact that there was an infestation with another colony. They had to separate themselves out. They had to do this. They had to do this. And at the end of the day, they could have been ruined by a company swooping in at the right time and convincing them that they were there to quote unquote help them. And like, that is a reality of things where it's like, these people are highly skilled. These people are highly functional. And the only thing that could have gone wrong was that they were at the wrong place at the wrong time. And they believed the wrong people. And that's also, I thought Martha Wells did a great job in this book, because she kind of talks about fake news in this, where like Murderbot is not an effective communicator. Murderbot has to go talk to someone who is a quote unquote like high level leader of a corporation.
It's supposed to be like a meeting, like they send two liaisons to meet. And it goes south because Murderbot wasn't prepared for what was going to happen here
of
where we
her
have
being like gaslighting it and being like, you
basically like
just want
a
to
Donald
starve
Trump
all these
figure
people.
who's
Yeah.
just like, you know what? I'm the most mentally sane person there is.
Yeah.
And I know that you did all these things. And it's like, what? Are you
Murderbot's
kidding
just
me?
sitting there being like, that's a lie. And then it doesn't know what to do. Like it was a
Mhm.
very accurate way of how these things go
Yeah.
down. And I
Mhm.
appreciate that Martha Wells does it because it's not through these huge events. It's through small moments of like, where will
Mhm.
like everything fall when you throw it up in the air, because that's all we have to go off of.
Yeah,
So it's very interesting.
absolutely.
Uh,
Any
what
favorite characters? Oh,
what did
go
you
ahead.
think of 3 in this book? Like we didn't get a ton of 3, but what did you
I hope
think of
we
like
get
having a
more
new
of
sec
three going
unit?
forward.
Yeah.
I think three is interesting because, and we get another sec unit now too
Hmm.
that could possibly play a role going forward. I think it would be interesting to. I would just like to see more of these other sec units that now have their governor modules hacked
Right.
because
Because
we're
Murderbot's like, we gotta stop doing this, and then does it every other chapter.
yeah. Murderbot is very distrustful of the other sec units, which is hilarious. But I I also just want to see more of what happens to them in their individual journeys
Yeah.
because I, obviously they're going to go a different path. They're not all going to be exactly like Murderbot, and it would just be really kind of interesting to see what happens with three specifically because three is so connected to Murderbot at
Hmm.
this point. And I really enjoyed seeing how Murderbot was so like not at ease with
No.
anything that three did. Like even just the mention of like, you want to watch a documentary on this? Like what? Are
I loved the
you
side
actually
eye.
want to do this? Just the questioning of whether or not three can go on missions, whether
Mhm.
three should be alone with people, whether three actually wants to do things that it says it wants to do is amazing.
Well, and like 3 going to something and being like, this is boring. And Murderbot's like, but you need to tell me what's going on. It's just so funny and humorous
Mhm.
because I do think Martha Wells is doing a great job as we get more sec units, like you're getting more personality types because like
Yeah.
no sec unit is one and the same. And so having that show through 3 being like, I'm super into nonfiction. Like I just love a good documentary. And Murderbot's like,
Yeah.
are you insane? Like,
What?
are you actually a serial killer? Do you enjoy killing? Like,
It's
I
like, I
just
love like romances.
and like Murderbot's just sitting there. And I also love it because like Murderbot is so private and like cares very much about like these are my things. And 3 has a different view of it where it's like, we are all a collective. Why wouldn't you just use my things? And
Right.
Murderbot's like, I can't do that. And then it's like, why am I so stupid? Why do I care so much? And it's just like, oh, it's showing like also the different types of personalities with like
Mhm.
what it means to be a sec unit and what it means to be part of a collective. Because Murderbot has been its own singular self for so
Yeah.
long that it hasn't had this community that's like willing and able, where like 3 had a very unique look where Murderbot 2.0 got to show it the certain things where it's like, oh, we
Mhm.
are in this together. Yes. And Murderbot is like, no, we are not. It's just very cute.
I think it's so interesting too that you brought up like the sharing of things because I remember reading that and specifically thinking like, oh, I wouldn't want to like I'm weird about borrowing things from
Hmm.
people and also lending things to people. I don't know why, but I feel so like the second I borrow something from someone, it like kind of weighs on me, and then I feel like, oh gosh, I got to get that back to them. Got to get that. I borrowed that thing from them. They're gonna be wanting it, and some people just do not care about that at all. They're just like, go ahead and borrow it. Bring it back when you're done.
I
And
never think twice about someone borrowing something from I always and
I
I also go into it with the expectation that it'll never get returned. Like that's always my expectation.
it's like honestly, Hannah, like I have a few books that I borrowed from you. I keep them towards the front of my stack of books here because I need to keep an eye on them because I'm just like I borrowed these books. They don't belong to me. And
I
it's just like a
sometimes
weird
check
thing.
in
And I'm
with
like,
her and I'm like,
it's like
hey, do you have this book? And she's like, no. And I'm like, oh, it must be Veronica. Someone has that book. This is our different. And I recently texted her and said, hey, do you actually want that book back that you had me read? And you're like, yeah, I do. And I was like, oh, I just like, I have a different expectation for books. So I just didn't know if it was one of those things where you're like, no, I lent it to you. So like, just donate it. Like, which is
certain books,
usually my
yes, but
energy. Yeah.
I I don't know. I just feel like even like borrowing like a sweater or something from my mom, I will like think about it like, oh, I gotta get that back to her. She's gonna be wanting it. And it's just like a weird thing when it comes to that kind of thing that I related to Murderbot in that moment to be like, no, you can't borrow those drones that you don't. What if you ruin them? You don't want to do that. You need your own drones. You need to have your own thing so you don't ruin it because you don't want to ruin other people's stuff. So I thought that was kind of something that I related to Murderbot, and maybe this is just a weird anxiety that I have about borrowing things, but yeah, I found that to be quite relatable. Maybe not in the exact same way that Murderbot was worried about it, but
That's fair. You didn't think the sweater was going to try to murder you at some point.
no.
No, but I like that we're getting more sec units. I think that that's a very
Mhm.
effective way. I thought I thought this book was more heavy on like themes and like the
Mhm.
drama than a lot of the other ones, but it still
Sure.
had a good amount of humor, like the like we're talking
And we
about
also
sex
get,
stuff. Like
yeah, that was funny too. To that character actually is interesting as well to have a character where we're like, I can't remember his name off the top of my head.
Mhm.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I forget. Yes, but I also forget his name off the top of my head. But it starts with a T, and the book is in the other room. I'd have to
Yes.
run.
Oh,
I
okay.
think it's like Tariq.
Okay. Sure. But
Okay,
that character is one that has a lot of trauma surrounding the corporation and is one that Murderbot is a little unsure if he can be trusted to be on this mission.
right.
And I think it's very interesting how the university and art they just put their faith in this person and turns out to be great, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's another way for Murderbot to kind of grow in its learning of people
Mm-hmm.
to have to not only kind of accept people who have tortured pasts like itself,
Yeah,
but to maybe make quicker decisions when it comes to can I trust this person? Is this person going to help me?
yeah.
Should I seek help from this person? So I thought that was a really interesting character to have in this too. And then also there's the humor of Rathi and him being in a relationship, a sexual relationship. So that was funny too.
I know. I do appreciate that. Like, we also get the human experience of
Hmm.
like of this new character who was like, no, I was in a death squad. I had a
Hmm.
similar experience to you, but it was also very different.
Right.
And it's interesting because I feel like I hope Martha Wells kind of, or I would be interested to see, I guess is the best way to put it, if Martha Wells kind of goes down a deeper hole with that of like, are there certain expectations they have for sec units that they don't have for humans? Because a lot of
Hmm.
people want like they have preconceived notions about sec units, but once they find out that Murderbot has its own identity and its own free will, they're kind of like, oh, well, you were built for that, so you're okay now. Where like with
Hmm.
this other character, they're like, we're keeping an eye on them. We don't really trust
Yeah.
them. We think he might fly off the handle.
Gonna go
It's
rogue.
and it's interesting because he seems to have a better handle where he's like, oh, I'm ready to
Yeah.
talk about this and I'm ready to do this and I'm ready to do this. And it's Murderbot who's having like
The hold up.
PTSD and
Hmm.
flashbacks and like horrible moments of like having a nightmare or like hallucinating and not knowing what to do about it and not knowing what it means. And it's interesting that there are those different expectations for these two characters.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it also just kind of shows how maybe again we're seeing Murderbot on a journey that it's not as far in its
Yeah,
emotional processing journey.
exactly.
What did you think about the nightmares and the PTSD that we got in this book?
I mean, I think it's very interesting because like it's such a real world experience for a lot of
Well, and
people.
honestly, the nightmares, Murderbot, it was like, I think I'm kind of blending
Mhm.
truth and dream together here.
Which I also thought was very unique because it's getting into something we don't talk a lot about, which is the trauma of not having all of your memories.
Yeah.
Like if you have a moment you don't remember, as someone who has the trauma of a drinking problem where I often blacked out, my worst nightmares are blackout nightmares. I have nightmares where I wake up and someone I love is angry with me and I do not know why. And they say, you don't remember what you did last night. You got drunk and you did, and they won't tell me what I did.
Hmm.
So there's a certain amount of horror that comes when you have parts of your memory you cannot access. It's scary and like we haven't gotten into a lot of that with murder bots
Right.
yet. And I have wondered about it with the fact that its first traumatic like processing was going back to the place where it murdered a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it kind of came to terms with, I don't know if I was ordered to do this, or I don't know if something went wrong with my
Governor module,
coding, my
just
governor
did it.
module, and I just did it. But I know that something happened to me that was out of my control. And that was its first fear-based thing. And so to come back to that all these books later and be like, so here's the thing, I think what I saw happened to someone else. I'm almost positive, but I cannot access that memory.
Right.
And it's like, that's terrifying. Like it's honestly very scary. And it's very realistic to do it in a way of like post-war trauma and post like in PTSD and just like Murderbot has been under a lot of tremendous stress, and it's helped like others get through their stress, like Mensa specifically.
Yeah.
And art specifically, where Murderbot hasn't been looking at itself and what it's been through. It's been kind of just trying to make sure everyone else is all right. And when we do that and we're not focusing on ourselves, bad things happen. Like you have to put your own mask on before you can put on someone else's breathing apparatus when the plane's going down. And Murderbot hasn't been doing that. And
Murderbot's very selfless, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and it has that like whole like, I'm stronger than the rest. I don't need this. I'm a Murderbot. I was built for this. I'm a sec unit. And it's kind of flirting like, oh no, this does have an effect on me. And I don't want to talk about it because that's scary, but like it's the truth.
Yeah, it's coming to grips with its own humanity, honestly, in a way that it didn't think it would. I think it maybe would have been more accepting of its humanity on a biological level, honestly, than it is on an emotional level, where it's a lot easier to accept, oh, yes, I'm very human if I am bleeding or if I need to have this or that kind of upgrade to my system because my physical health is different. It's a whole nother level to have to address that you need help, or that you are more human than you thought because of your emotions.
Right. So, you know, I thought this was a very interesting take on it. I thought it was very well done and good for Martha Wells for like keeping us on our toes,
honestly. Because like so many times you and I are like, I don't think she's gonna come back to that, but surprise, we're back and we're delving into things further. I absolutely loved this book. I just thought so many great things happened. I don't know that there were any like standout characters besides maybe Iris. Iris and Art is always a standout. I guess we talked about a handful of characters. Art is always a standout, but Art was just like, it's typical. We have now Perihelion has holism that I hope we get more holism because
it's just trying to aggravate me. Don't talk to it.
Holism is totally going to be hilarious if we get more of that. So I really hope so.
Me too. These are just fantastic books. If you guys are just listening to us talk about them, go pick them up and read them because they're so much fun. Can't say enough good things about
they're just little nuggets. They're easy to read. I love a novella, so pick them up.
Pick it up. It's only been out for 2 weeks. Read the other books that came before it. And you know, that brings us
to your library.
That brings us to a close of System Collapse. So we hope you guys enjoyed our little bout back into the Murderbot Diaries.
And we'll be back for the other 5.
You will be back for the other 5 that Laura's gonna lock her in a basement and
oh my gosh,
make sure she's writing them. You must write more.
No, there's a contract. We already got that contract.
So make sure that you guys are looking into that, and make sure you guys are following along with us right now. Like we said, we are recording these pretty well in advance. So we don't really for what our schedule looks like.
So coming up, we've got just a lot of fun holiday stuff, really, because we'll have our episode coming up, our nostalgia book club with fiction fans, which we are covering Angels Watching Over Me by Lurleen McDaniel.
Yes.
Which is sure to be lots of fun,
guys.
It's about a young Amish girl dying.
No. Well, yes and no. So So in the funniest turn of events, we do Nostalgia Book Club with fiction fans. And I had promised them Just Ella, which is a great novel about a Cinderella retelling after the wedding. And then it got close to Christmas, and I said, no, 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 I'm going to give you an Amish angel book instead, much to Sarah's delight.
Which is hilarious because Sarah was looking forward to Just Ella, and Hannah pulled the rug out from under her.
So many, and then it became a joke where it's like, we are going to promise her Just Ella, that we're gonna be like, psych, we're gonna do this awful book. But it's a Lorraine McDaniel book about a young girl during the holidays who was diagnosed with cancer. And as she is in the hospital, she meets a young Amish girl and the Amish girl's brother, and sparks may fly between this tragic torture porn that was Hannah's childhood. When I tell you that I've read so many of these books, I cannot wait to do this episode. No one will have fun but me. It'll be great.
I've never read this and I'm scared. I don't know what to think.
So yes, we have that. We will also be doing a holiday movie episode a la last year's. Please listen to it. Someone like 2 months ago was like, I listened to your Gremlins episode and it was pure chaos. Also one of my favorite movies of all time. Like I literally was at
You had never watched it before.
I've never watched it before, and I watched it twice in a month. It's so good. I have like a Gremlins print on my wall as well with my Labyrinth prints.
Amazing.
Last night I was talking to my future sister-in-law and I was like, oh my God, we watched Practical Magic. It was so good. Like, I will have to watch Gremlins around Christmas. And she was like, I've never seen Gremlins. So I'm like, just wait, because you and I will be watching it now.
That's amazing.
Best holiday movie ever. But we will be doing another holiday movie. So if you guys, keep an eye out for that. And then we'll be doing, of course, a year-end season wrap-up. And if we haven't posted it yet, because there's a little bit more of a flip-flop on when these episodes are coming out, but we may be posting our end of the season review, so of Wheel of Time season 2. So keep an eye out for all of that. And yeah, just follow
season
us along.
2 has been so good.
Gosh. Do you want, since this is Murder Bot Diaries, should we announce our...
Oh yes, we were going to announce what our next seasons are going to be.
So Laura, would you like to announce the next seasons?
Sure. So we're going to start out 2024 covering Legendborn and Bloodmarked by Tracy Deonn. And then, which these books have gotten a ton of hype. So do not let me down. I am so excited because I pitched these and Hannah and I were going to do a buddy read. And I was just like, what if we covered them on the podcast? And Hannah was like, bet, let's do it.
She pulled a Just Ella Angels Watch It Go for Me twisteroo.
This was not a series that we had talked about covering on the pod.
No,
just wanted to do a buddy read of it, and I was just like, "What if we covered it on the pod?" And you're like, "Okay." So it just worked out that way. But there's only 2 books out in that series. I think it's only going to be a trilogy, so that'll be another one. We'll have to come back,
right?
But I'm sure it'll be a ton of fun. But after that, Hannah, what are we covering?
Guys, it's gonna be big. We are doing a portion of the Dresden Files.
The Dresden Files.
We're doing it. Everyone has been asking, like, people have asked us to cover the Dresden Files many a time.
We've been requested to do these books so much, Hannah, like more than any other book.
Like, people keep being like, no, I actually think you guys should read these. I think you should. The chaos that will ensue on you two reading these will like be unheard of. And so
new listeners to our podcast are immediately like, have you guys covered the Dresden Files yet?
They'll be halfway through Wheel of Time and they're just like, but Dresden Files, that seems like it should be on your radar.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing. I think we're
covering
right
the
now
first
the first 6. So it'll be interesting.
Because there's a million books. So we're like, let's cover the first 6 and then we'll cover another series just to give ourselves a mental break.
Yeah, we're not doing the Wheel of Time-ness of these books.
There's like 34 of them, so
I think there are 18, but like
there'll be 34 by the time we get through these 6. Jim Butcher is prolific. So
there are a total of 17 books. They're still coming out.
Yeah.
We can't do all 17 in order because Laura and I would
not
die.
In one jump. Not in one jump. I'm sorry.
I can't
but
do that.
We're going to cover the first 6, and that's going to take us through a pretty pretty big portion of the year, honestly.
Yeah. So those are our like next mini series. We also are still doing our bonus episode content in between each book. So if you guys have anything you'd like to see, any books you'd like to see us cover during that time that isn't a mini series, but like a quick one-off, any TV shows, things like that, let us know.
Or if you have any indie authors that you'd like us to chat with, we would love to get more indie authors on for these bonus episodes as well. So if there's anyone specifically that you're like, hey, you guys should talk to this person,
we're looking on to get as many as we can in the next year upcoming. So just keep an eye out for our, we put everything on ourpod.com. Our reading schedule, we try to keep it as up to date as possible that two people can do who have full-time jobs. Yes. And, just keep an eye out for things going on our Patreon. Please join our Patreon. It's, cheap, and it helps us like run the podcast. Like it helps us with mailings. It helps us. I think we're going to try to do things like get new bookmarks out for people and things like that soon. So make sure you're keeping an eye out for all of that stuff, and make sure you're following us on all the social platforms that we are on.
Literally all of them.
WWR pod.
And we're on all of them, and we have an email. So email us if you have a really long thought that you need to get out about the Dresden Files and you want us to talk about it next year, email
or Discord, at our Discord, because our Discord is fun and we love chit-chatting on it. So make sure you guys are joining us on all of those things, because we're here to chit-chat with you. And then
thanks so much for listening. It really means a lot that you're here listening. We really appreciate it.
We really do. As we come closer to the end of the year, you're going to get way more thank yous, because that's usually when you and I get a little bit nostalgic. Sappy. I know. And we're just like, we love all of you. Thank you so much for listening. But it is fun to see how we've grown and changed throughout this year versus last year. And, this is an indie podcast itself. So it's just fun to see how much we're doing with it. So,
and hold on to your freaking hats, because
Harry Dresden will steal it.
Harry Copperfield, something Dresden, something.
The longest name in the world.
Too many names. He is on his way into our library.
He's coming for all of you. Bye.